Welcome to A Woman's Strength, empowering stories from struggles to triumph. I'm Rosita, your host, fellow warrior, and advocate for resilience and empowerment. Through this podcast, we share authentic stories of women who have faced adversity and emerged as living testimonies of strength. Their stories will inspire you to break free from limitations, embrace your authenticity, and rise above the challenges life throws your way. Together, let's discover the strength within us and create a community of empowered women who support and uplift one another. Join me every second and fourth Friday at 12:30 p.m. Pacific on Facebook as we uncover the keys to resilience, self-discovery, and integrating faith with personal growth. A woman's strength begins now. Everyone, thank you and welcome for joining A Woman's Strength, empowering stories from struggles to triumphs. My guests are women who share their stories of struggles, talk about how self-doubt affected them, and being victorious in the end. And I don't know about you, Andrea, but every time I get to a point where it's one of those tough days, right? Because we just are going through the journey. We're not going to ever arrive until I think that we finally go on to heaven, right? We're just like, okay, we're done. On those days, I watch stories or I listen to it of women who have been through a struggle and overcame and triumphed in the end. So for me, that really helps me ignites my strength and brings me hope that, hey, if she can do it, I can do it too. Do you relate to that?
Oh, very much so. And I so appreciate being able to share my struggle with you and what you're doing to help women, as you just said, hear from others and know that, hey, I can do it too.
Right.
Love it.
So before we move forward, I am Rosita Perez. I am your host and self-discovery coach. And we have with us Andrea Bjorkman. Did I say that right?
Bjorkman.
Bjorkman.
Close
Okay.
enough.
Now, Andrea is a CEO. She's a coach, co-founder of Fizz Enterprise. She's also a life coach for women over 40 navigating through life transitions. And don't we go through it? We have different seasons in life that we go through. And Andrea and I can help you through that. But
Yes.
She specifically helps women over 40 who are navigating through life transitions. And she'll get more into that as we get into the podcast. So welcome, Andrea.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, being vulnerable, sharing a struggle and how you overcame and moved towards victory. So we got like about 25 minutes, and I don't want to miss anything that you're going to say. So let's go ahead and dive in. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So can you share with me one struggle that moved you toward discovering your unique strengths?
Yes, I will. And I will try to hold back the tears because it's still very, very difficult for me. But I'm grateful for the experience and the learnings and being able to help others, as you've said, that know that they can get through it too. So at the age of...
Let me just stop for a second and just acknowledge you.
Thank you.
For being vulnerable. So I thank you for being vulnerable.
Thank you. And it happened over 38 years ago. And yes, it's still very fresh. So at the age of 25, I had two little very healthy little girls. Erin was 4 and Megan was 2. I was pregnant with our first boy. And at the age of gestation of about almost 21 weeks, I had a stillbirth. So Sean Robert O'Connor would have been 39 years next month. And this was, a long time ago where there really wasn't an understanding of how to help families, moms and families go through this situation. I was in a small town in upstate New York, and so that they had even less resources available. I was lucky in that my nurse had just come back the weekend before from a seminar about helping women go through this. So the timing of that was really good. And today at that gestation, they are starting to be able to have the technology and the understanding on how to save babies. Still not there yet, because 21 weeks is, really, really young, really, really new. So I had no idea how strong I actually was, being able to manage through this experience for myself and for my family. And what was really interesting, the doctor who delivered him was a resident himself and was my age. And he had never had this type of delivery. So he didn't know what to do. And it was really hard. And he was really shook up. And what was interesting, and maybe it's the mom in me, and maybe I needed something else to help someone else because what I was going through, but I helped comfort him, which I look back on now, I'm like, really? I had, as I said, had 2 little girls. I knew I had an understanding of what babies look like at that stage. But seeing this little guy, I have his footprints there, this big, 5 toes, on both feet, seeing him, and we got to hold him. And I even said to my husband at the time, and I said, he looks just like us. And he always has such a great sense of humor. He goes, who's he supposed to look like? I'm like, you're right. I know. It's just the understanding at that short of a gestation, how real they really look. And so I will never forget that. Again, they were going to incinerate his body because you didn't do what you do now as far as burying babies and that kind of thing. Luckily, we were by a research center in Lake Placid, which is about a half hour away. So we were able to donate his body so that they could, at least something could be done, right? Perhaps he would bring some sort of comfort to other families. And so and I said, I almost 39 years and I'm still feeling the way I feel.
I don't blame you at all. I don't know what that feels like, but again, thank you so much for sharing the story, because that's a deep pain there. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you. And it feels good to share it as well. I like to talk about him. I would not have, I have 4 daughters. Daughter number 3, Sarah, came along and she likes to tell her sister she was the only one that was planned. And it's kind of true. But we would not have her had we lost Sean. And she is, all of my girls are incredibly wonderful, unique individuals, but this one, really unique.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I like, Andrea, how you talked about that you encourage the doctor that was helping you. A lot of times when we go through self-doubt, that is one of the things that we can do to help ourselves get through whatever we're going through, is to give.
Yes. And it just came naturally. I didn't realize it until it was happening. And then to know that I was helping him and that was also helping me, that was huge. So I love that you called out that point.
Yes. And would you say then that at that moment that you discovered, was that a unique strength that you didn't know that you had?
Yes, I think so. Again, I was still a young mother. And now I look back, of course I had that strength, but I didn't recognize it. That self-doubt, another way that showed up was I knew a couple of days before the actual appointment or delivery, I should say, and I hate using that word, but that's what it was, that something was wrong, but I didn't trust my own instincts. I didn't advocate for myself. 2 days after I felt like something wasn't right, I waited until my regularly scheduled appointment. I had sat in that doctor's office and overheard nurses taking phone calls from mothers, and they were perhaps complaining about things that weren't serious. And I'd heard them kind of badmouth them. And I did talk to the doctor about that later. And so I had that in the back of my mind. And I also had in the back of my mind that, who was I to doubt a doctor, right? Especially a man. I could not have saved Sean. He was gone at that time. I could have saved a lot of worry and stress that went, that happened over those few days. So learning to advocate for myself, huge, 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 huge.
That is huge. And I'm glad that you stood up for the other moms that were, because nobody wants to hear that.
No.
And we have to work hard not to be that way because it's become so natural, so second nature to just talk about it, talk about another woman. And, if it's something that is in line with what we're, trying to get through, then that's different. But
Right.
to outright gossip for no
Yes.
specific reason, that's just not necessary. So with your unique strengths that you found out is that you have compassion and you're able to give it, even in
Yes.
the midst of your heartache.
Right.
That's huge. And then the other one was that you advocated for other moms.
Yes. And that I advocate now, and I tell women all the time, advocate for yourself, trust your instincts, especially when it's your body, your health, right? You're the only one that can really say how you feel. And so advocate for yourself and don't ever, not speak up, because that's just crazy. If I had not had that appointment just a few days after I think he died, and I had to then go home and spend the night at home and then to go back in the next morning to have the delivery because the hospital needed to be fully staffed. But at the same time, if it had waited longer, I would have had blood poisoning and I could very well have died. So another, it's just like, oh my goodness, right? It also was the beginning of my volunteer experience helping children and families. I have done that since then. I do it unbelievably wonderful for Healthy Daughters and in memory of Sean. I'm currently the chair of the Children's Hospital of Illinois, where amazing things happen all day, every day. And that's how I know they delivered about a year ago a baby that was like 23 weeks gestation. And was he in the NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit, for a very long time? Yes. But that was a miracle that had never happened before. So I get such enjoyment out of that. And that's why it's part of my mission for my business is to be able to allocate more time and money towards that organization. And it's because of my experience.
Share how you turned your struggles into opportunities for growth. So you didn't just turn it into opportunities for growth. You as you reached out and helped, it helped you to do the healing, and you're still doing it.
Right. Yeah, that's so true.
That's super important, and it feeds you and your spirit, and you're honoring your son as well by doing that. And what an example that you're setting for your daughter.
That's what was always my concern as well. So thank you for recognizing that. And now one of my daughters is pregnant. My Sarah is almost 16 weeks pregnant. So with her first, after going through one round of IVF. And so, wow.
Okay. So I'm going to ask, is that triggering for you? Is that something that you got to step back and don't let your experience be her experience?
Right.
Because I do it all the time with my daughter.
No, it's such a good question. Yes. And I work really hard not to, because IVF and all of that brings a whole different, different amount of risks and that kind of thing. And I just have to step back, as you said, both for myself and for her, to say, hey, my experience doesn't have to be her. It's not going to be her experience, right?
Right. You got to speak it and believe it.
Exactly.
Because this will be your first grandchild?
My second.
Oh, your second.
Yes.
Okay, great. Your first one is a granddaughter?
A granddaughter with my oldest, and she will be 14 in February. And then, Sarah's, I don't know that I can say what she's having, and then my husband's, so I have 4 daughters. My husband has 2. His oldest daughter has 2 grandsons. So has 2 sons. So we have 2 grandsons as well.
Oh, that's awesome. So you're also in a blended marriage.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So we got to have you back on so we can talk about that, because that's a whole different world.
Yeah, very much so.
Being married traditionally to a blended marriage. And that is becoming such a norm nowadays.
Right.
And it is, if you don't know, well, I didn't know what I was doing going into it. So I made plenty of mistakes, but did a lot of good things too.
Yep. I'm sure you did.
Oh, I would love to have you back on just to talk about that. The whole
I would love it as well.
How do you do it, and what works, and of course every family is different as well.
Right.
Yes. So totally going to get on your calendar to do that podcast.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So tell me, Andrea, how did self-doubt show up during that time for you?
It was just really not understanding, more than anything else, not trusting my instinct. And to get me to that point, not understanding how much strength I really had. I didn't talk about it a lot. People were very uncomfortable. You know, the people I worked with knew that it had occurred. I thought, and it was a true delivery, right? So I had 6 weeks off, but I thought I had to go back to work 2 weeks later. That lasted about a half of a day, because then I started having problems because it was a true delivery. You don't get back on your feet and go to work.
No, you shouldn't.
No, no. And that was a big mistake.
Okay. And so how did you, with those self-doubts, you said not trusting your instinct and not understanding the strength that you had. So what can we tell the women that are listening? How do you overcome not trusting your instinct? Because that is definitely a self-doubt, right? Because you know something is not right. But our negative self-talk says, you don't know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Just leave it alone.
Right.
Just sit down and be quiet, kind of thing. Right.
Yes.
So how did you get past that?
It took a lot of, just contemplation on my part and looking back at the situation and how I could have done it better. Like I said, call the doctor as soon as I felt something wasn't right, and understanding what happened, what could have happened if I hadn't had that regularly scheduled appointment anyway. And then just starting to feel, looking back and seeing, hey, you got this, you can do this. And that's when I really started to understand, and I've used it throughout my whole career, is, when your gut says something, listen to it, because it is right 99% of the time.
Yes, that is definitely a gift that we women have.
Yeah, we just have to use it, right? We know.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's being confident enough to stand on that, regardless of what anybody else says.
Yeah.
It's like, this is what's happening. I know it in my soul. Like, I don't want to say gut, because what is that? So I love that. I love that you not only now recognize it, you've overcame it. You overcame the negative self-talk and the feelings that could come with the stillbirth and losing a child. I can't even imagine what that could have felt like.
Right.
And then that inner strength that you have allowed you to continue on, and then have 2 more beautiful kids after that.
Yes, I know. Grateful. So incredibly grateful.
Wow. So, we are at 10 minutes, and I want to be able to just do a quick recap. The self-doubt came in when you lost your son, and you honored your son by then volunteering at the hospital.
I'm the chair of the board.
Yes. So you turn that struggle into an opportunity, not just for yourself, but to honor your son.
Right.
And the self-doubt came in with not understanding your own strength and not trusting your spirit, I'm going to say. And then you overcame that. Now you help other women do that.
Yes. Yes.
That is awesome. What advice would you give to a woman who is listening right now that is struggling with that she may feel guilty? She may feel like it's her fault. What one thing that can you say to a woman who's feeling that way?
I would say put one foot in front of the other, take the risk, give it a try. 9 times out of 10, that will get you moving, right? Just some action, take some action, and then you'll start to see the benefits of it. Because that's all, you can't just do a little quick change in your head, right? I wish it were that easy. You have to take some sort of an action, move, and then it'll start becoming so much easier.
Yeah. And it's a process. It's not going to happen overnight.
No.
It will take time. And I have not been through it. And I would say, give yourself grace. Be kind to yourself. Yes. When you go through any kind of huge trauma like that, you've got to learn to self-care, self-soothe.
Right.
Because what happens is we take it out on people around us.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're alone, and then we're mad because we're alone. But we kind of self-inflicted that, right?
Right.
Because we don't know what we're dealing with. So when we become self-aware and understand how we can self-soothe and take care of ourselves and then be kind to ourselves in our self-talk, I know it will go a long way. That's how it helped in my healing.
Right. Definitely. And find your community, right? Like
Oh,
what you're doing with this podcast. And it's so much easier these days because the ability to be virtual, find that community from around the world, but you want to do it in person as well, because there's so many, especially as women, we need that in a way that is more important today than ever before.
And I'm going to say that nowadays we are so much more aware, and we're hungry to
Yes.
not stay in that stuck place where we
Right.
are not being all that we're supposed to be.
Right.
So I love that. So Andrea, thank you so much again for being vulnerable.
Thank you.
I know that this was a tough conversation, but I appreciate you opening up and helping another woman who is listening to this podcast. How can people reach you?
Directly, you can email me at andrea@findyourfizz.com. My website, findyourfizz.com. And then I'm on, Facebook and LinkedIn. I'm trying to be everywhere I possibly can.
Now, here's the thing with Andrea. She has been through the loss of a child. She's been through other things, I'm sure. We just don't have time on this podcast to unpack all of that. So she is aware of the struggles, and there is no better person to walk through that. I'm sure that Andrea will hold your hand and get you through and to the place that you want to be, which is freedom, right? We want to be free from the stuff that holds us back and to be able to live a life free from self-doubt, right?
So well said. Yes. Thank you.
So we are at a close. And before I close, I want to invite you to go to my website at movingforwardforlife.com. Schedule your complimentary clarity call. It's 30 minutes for you, all about you, and we can create a mini plan to overcome self-doubt. Remember that you are not alone, and you have the power to choose the trajectory of your life. You have the choice. You can stay on the same road that you're at and go through the same pains, and it's comfortable. I get it. Or you can go down this other road of starting to understand who you are, doing the work to become the best that you can be. Now, both sides have pain, but when you rather have the light at the end of the tunnel, when you choose you and live a life that you deserve. Thank you so much, Andrea. I so appreciate you joining me, and I look forward to our next podcast on blended families.
Thank you.